When 46-year-old Jake Sullivan walked into the Walmart on Route 22 in Springfield, Missouri at 8:30 on Christmas Eve to grab batteries for his grandson's toys, he never imagined he'd leave 2 hours later with a terrified 9-year-old girl who'd been abandoned in the store, her mother's car already 3 states away, and a promise to make sure this child had somewhere safe to sleep on the most important night of the year. The moment Jake found Emma Chen sitting alone in the toy aisle, clutching a stuffed reindeer and trying not to cry while shoppers rushed past her like she didn't exist, would transform both their lives and prove that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't wrapped in paper, but delivered through the simple act of refusing to walk away when a child needs someone to notice they're in trouble. The Walmart on Christmas Eve was absolute chaos. The kind of frantic, desperate shopping atmosphere that turned normally reasonable people into aggressive cart-wielding competitors fighting over the last remaining toys and decorations. By 8:30 in the evening, the store was packed with last-minute shoppers, their faces showing various degrees of stress and exhaustion as they scrambled to complete purchases before the holiday arrived in just a few hours. Children cried from overstimulation and fatigue. Parents snapped at each other over forgotten items, and the checkout lines stretched halfway back into the main aisles, with wait times approaching 45 minutes. Jake Sullivan navigated through the madness with the patient tolerance of someone who'd raised 3 kids and knew that Christmas Eve shopping was always chaos no matter how well you planned. He was a big man, 6'3" and 260 pounds, with a gray-streaked beard that reached his chest and arms covered in tattoos that told the story of 23 years riding with the Ozark Thunder Motorcycle Club. His black leather vest bore patches marking him as a member in good standing, a veteran who'd served in Desert Storm, and a man who'd participated in dozens of charity toy runs over the years. The club had a solid reputation throughout Missouri for their community work, their support of veteran causes, and their absolute commitment to protecting kids and families who needed help. Tonight, Jake was on a simple mission. His daughter Sarah had called in a panic because the batteries for his grandson Tyler's remote-control fire truck had died during gift wrapping, and every store near her house was already closed or sold out. Jake had promised to grab replacements and drop them off before heading to the club's Christmas Eve gathering at their clubhouse outside of town. It should have been a 15-minute errand. Get in, grab batteries, check out, and leave. But as Jake walked through the toy section searching for the electronics department, something made him stop and look twice at the small figure sitting on the floor beside a display of stuffed animals. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with straight black hair that fell past her shoulders and dark eyes that were red-rimmed from crying. She wore jeans and a pink winter coat that looked too thin for December in Missouri, sneakers that had seen better days, and she clutched a stuffed reindeer toy against her chest like it was the only solid thing in a world that had gone wrong. What caught Jake's attention wasn't just that she was sitting alone. Kids got separated from their parents in stores all the time, but the look on her face. That expression of controlled panic mixed with resignation that came from waiting too long, from hoping someone would come back and slowly realizing they might not. Jake scanned the area looking for a parent or guardian who might be shopping nearby while keeping an eye on their child. But the shoppers moving through the toy section were all focused on their own missions, grabbing items and rushing toward checkout, none of them showing any awareness of the small girl sitting alone on the floor. Jake watched for 2 full minutes as people walked past her, some nearly stepping on her, none of them stopping to ask if she was okay or needed help. The girl didn't call out to anyone, didn't try to get attention, just sat there holding that reindeer and trying very hard not to cry harder than she already had been. Something in Jake's gut told him this wasn't a simple case of temporary separation. He'd worked security at a children's hospital for 5 years before retiring, had seen enough scared kids to recognize the difference between momentary confusion and genuine abandonment. This child had the look of someone who'd been waiting long enough to give up hope. Jake approached slowly, not wanting to scare her, and knelt down a few feet away to bring himself to her eye level. His size could be intimidating to kids, and he'd learned long ago to make himself smaller and less threatening when talking to frightened children. "Hey there, sweetheart. You okay?" The girl looked up at him with those tear-filled eyes and tried to smile, tried to pretend everything was fine the way kids often did when they were taught not to make trouble. "I'm okay," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the store noise. "Just waiting." Jake glanced around again, still seeing no adult showing any concern for this child. "Waiting for your mom or dad? Are they shopping somewhere in the store?" The girl's face crumpled slightly and she looked down at the reindeer in her arms. "My mom was here. We were shopping and she said she needed to go get something and told me to wait right here and not move. So I've been waiting. But it's been a really long time and she hasn't come back yet." Jake felt cold settle in his chest despite the stuffy warmth of the overcrowded store. "How long have you been waiting, honey?" The girl's small shoulders lifted in an uncertain shrug. "I don't know exactly. It was still light outside when she left. Now it's dark." Jake looked toward the store windows and confirmed that full night had fallen, which meant this child had been sitting alone for at least an hour, possibly much longer. "What's your name?" Emma Chen. I'm 9 years old. Nice to meet you, Emma. I'm Jake." He kept his voice gentle and calm, even though anger was starting to build beneath his surface composure. "Where do you live? Do you know your mom's phone number? We can call her and find out where she is." Emma shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't have her new number memorized yet. She just got a new phone last week and I only called it once. We moved here 2 months ago from California and I don't really know the address yet either. Mom says I need to learn it, but I keep forgetting the street name." The pieces were falling into place in a pattern Jake recognized from too many news stories and police reports. A recent move, a parent who'd left a child alone in a public place, no way for the child to make contact, hours of waiting. This wasn't a parent who'd gotten delayed in another department. This was abandonment. "Emma, I want you to listen to me carefully, okay? You're not in trouble and you didn't do anything wrong. But I think we need to get some help to find your mom. I'm going to talk to the store managers, and we're going to figure this out together. Is that okay with you?" Emma nodded, her small fingers gripping the reindeer tighter. "Are you going to leave me too?" The question hit Jake like a physical blow, the raw fear in this child's voice revealing just how terrified she'd been sitting alone, watching person after person walk past without stopping to help. "No, sweetheart. I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to stay right here with you until we get this sorted out. I promise." Jake pulled out his phone and called the store's customer service desk, explaining the situation and requesting a manager meet them in the toy section immediately. While they waited, he sat down on the floor beside Emma, giving her space but making it clear through his presence that she wasn't alone anymore. "You like reindeer?" he asked, gesturing to the stuffed toy she held. Emma looked down at it and nodded. "I was looking at the Christmas toys while I waited. This one is really soft and it has a red nose like Rudolph. Mom said I couldn't get any toys tonight because we were just looking. But I've been holding this one because it makes me feel less scared." "You can hold on to that as long as you need to," Jake said gently. "Sometimes having something soft helps when things are scary." The store manager arrived within 5 minutes, a woman in her 40s named Patricia, who took one look at Emma's tear-streaked face and Jake's protective posture and immediately understood the severity of the situation. She knelt down beside them and introduced herself to Emma with practiced kindness before addressing Jake in a low voice, meant to keep the child from hearing the worst of their concerns. "How long has she been alone?" "At least an hour from what she's told me, possibly longer. Says her mother told her to wait here and hasn't come back. Kid doesn't know her mom's new phone number or their current address. They moved here recently from California." Patricia's expression tightened with controlled anger and professional concern. "I'm calling the police. This is abandonment." She stood and made the call while Jake stayed with Emma, who was watching the adults with growing anxiety that showed she understood something serious was happening, even if she didn't fully grasp what it meant. Within 20 minutes, 2 Springfield police officers arrived, a male officer in his 50s named Daniels and a younger female officer named Rodriguez, who immediately took charge of interviewing Emma with gentle questions designed to gather information without traumatizing the child further. Emma provided what details she could. Her full name was Emma Chen. She was 9 years old. She'd moved to Springfield from Los Angeles with her mother Rebecca 2 months ago. They lived in an apartment, but Emma couldn't remember the street name or apartment number. Her mother didn't have family in the area that Emma knew about, and Emma's father wasn't in their lives, a detail she shared with the matter-of-fact sadness of a child who'd accepted that reality long ago. Officer Rodriguez asked about the car her mother drove, and Emma described a blue Honda with a dent in the back bumper and California license plates she couldn't remember completely. The officers checked the parking lot but found no vehicle matching that description. They ran Rebecca Chen's name through their system and found a Missouri driver's license issued 8 weeks earlier, confirming Emma's timeline about the recent move. The address listed was for a low-rent apartment complex on the east side of Springfield. Patricia pulled up the store's security footage and found the moment when Rebecca Chen had walked away from Emma in the toy aisle at 6:45 that evening, nearly 2 hours ago. The footage showed Rebecca telling Emma something, the child nodding obediently, and then Rebecca walking toward the exit and leaving the store completely. She hadn't returned. She'd simply abandoned her daughter in a Walmart on Christmas Eve and driven away. Officer Daniels spoke quietly with Jake and Patricia while Rodriguez stayed with Emma and tried to keep the girl calm. "We're sending a unit to the address on file, but I'm not optimistic we'll find her there. This has the hallmarks of someone who planned to leave and used the holiday chaos as cover." Christmas Eve, a crowded store, kid told to wait quietly, mother walks out knowing the child won't immediately raise alarm. By the time anyone notices and acts, she's hours gone. His expression showed the weary frustration of someone who'd seen this pattern too many times. "We'll get child services involved, find emergency foster placement for tonight. It's going to be rough given it's Christmas Eve, but we'll manage something." Jake looked over at Emma, who sat on the floor still clutching that stuffed reindeer, her small face showing the brave mask children wore when they were trying not to fall apart completely. The thought of this kid spending Christmas Eve getting shuffled through emergency systems, probably ending up in some overwhelmed foster home with strangers, possibly separated from the one toy that was giving her comfort, made something fierce and protective rise in Jake's chest. He'd spent 23 years with Ozark Thunder participating in toy runs and charity events, specifically to help kids who had nothing, who'd been failed by the adults who should have protected them. And here was a child who needed someone to show up for her in the most immediate and desperate way. "Officer Daniels, I'd like to volunteer as emergency placement for tonight if that's possible. I know it's unusual, but I'm not a complete stranger to the system. I've done volunteer work with foster programs through my motorcycle club. I've got background clearances for our charity work with kids, and I can provide references. My daughter lives 10 minutes from here, and she can vouch for me. This child shouldn't have to spend Christmas Eve bouncing through emergency placements if there's a better option." Daniels looked at Jake with surprise, and something that might have been respect. "That's generous of you, Mr. Sullivan, but there are protocols. We can't just release a minor to someone who isn't family or a registered foster parent, even temporarily." "I understand the protocols," Jake said firmly but without aggression. "But it's Christmas Eve. You're going to have a hard time finding placement on short notice. And even if you do, this kid is going to remember spending tonight scared and alone in a strange place with people she's never met. I'm offering to give her somewhere safe until you can sort out proper placement tomorrow. I've got a 4-bedroom house with a guest room. I've got a daughter who's a pediatric nurse and a grandson who's 7 years old. We can give Emma a Christmas Eve that doesn't compound her trauma. At least let me call my daughter and have her come down here so you can talk to her and verify I'm not some random person making promises I can't keep." Officer Rodriguez had been listening while staying close to Emma, and she spoke up with the practical authority of someone who'd worked enough child welfare cases to know the system's limitations. "Daniels, he's not wrong about placement tonight. I've already gotten 2 calls back saying they're at capacity and can't take emergency intake on Christmas Eve. We're looking at institutional temporary hold if we can't find something better. If Mr. Sullivan has verifiable background and local family support, it might be worth considering as a stopgap until child services can do proper placement assessment tomorrow." Jake called his daughter Sarah while the officers discussed options, and she arrived at the store 20 minutes later with her 7-year-old son Tyler in tow. Sarah was a pediatric nurse at Springfield Children's Hospital with 15 years of experience working with traumatized kids, and she immediately understood the situation when she saw Emma sitting on the floor, looking small and scared and utterly alone. She spoke with the officers, provided her credentials, vouched for her father's character and his years of volunteer work with vulnerable children, and made it clear that Emma would have a safe, appropriate environment if they allowed temporary placement with their family until child services could intervene the day after Christmas. The officers made calls, consulted with their supervisor, ran background checks on both Jake and Sarah that came back completely clean, and ultimately made the decision that keeping Emma with a vetted volunteer family was better than institutional hold on Christmas Eve. They documented everything carefully, made Jake and Sarah sign multiple forms acknowledging the temporary nature of the arrangement and their obligation to cooperate fully with child services, and gave Emma the option to say no if she felt uncomfortable with any part of the plan. Emma looked up at Jake with those dark eyes that had seen too much disappointment for 9 years of life. "You really won't leave me? You promise this isn't a trick?" Jake knelt down beside her and spoke with absolute sincerity. "I promise, Emma. You're going to come home with me and my daughter Sarah and her son Tyler. We're going to make sure you have dinner and a safe place to sleep tonight. Tomorrow we'll work with the police and child services to figure out what happens next. But tonight, you don't have to be alone and you don't have to be scared. You're going to be safe with us." Emma looked at Sarah, who gave her a gentle smile that carried all the warmth of someone who'd devoted her career to helping frightened children. "I know this is really scary and confusing, sweetie, but my dad is telling you the truth. We're going to take good care of you tonight, and I brought my son Tyler with me so you can see that we're a regular family, not scary strangers." Tyler waved shyly at Emma from behind his mother's legs. He was small for 7, with his grandfather's dark hair and his mother's kind eyes. "Hi," he said quietly. "Do you like hot chocolate?" "Mom makes really good hot chocolate. We were going to have some tonight, and you can have some too if you want." Emma's face showed the first hint of something other than fear, a fragile hope that maybe things might actually be okay. "I like hot chocolate," she whispered. Patricia, the store manager, who'd been watching the entire exchange with visible emotion, stepped forward with the stuffed reindeer Emma had been holding. "Emma, honey, this reindeer is yours now. Merry Christmas from Walmart. You take him home and keep him safe." Emma's eyes went wide with surprise and gratitude. "Really? I can keep him? Really and truly? Every kid deserves at least one Christmas present, especially a brave girl like you who's handled a really hard night with so much courage." They left the Walmart together, Jake carrying the bag with batteries he'd originally come for, plus a few other items Sarah had quickly grabbed, clothes and toiletries and things a 9-year-old girl might need for an overnight stay. Emma walked between Jake and Sarah, holding Tyler's hand because the little boy had reached out to her with the unself-conscious kindness of children who haven't yet learned to be afraid of connection. The parking lot was still busy with last-minute shoppers rushing to their cars, none of them aware that the small group walking past represented a child who'd been abandoned, finding unexpected rescue on the loneliest night of her young life. Jake's house was a comfortable ranch-style home on 3 acres outside Springfield's city limits, the kind of place where a man who loved motorcycles and needed space to work on them could live without neighbors complaining about noise. The driveway held his current bike, a Road King he'd owned for 8 years, plus his truck and the small sedan Sarah drove. Inside, the house showed signs of comfortable bachelor living mixed with clear evidence that a grandchild visited regularly. There were photos on the walls showing Jake's family over the years, his late wife Margaret, who died from cancer 6 years earlier, his 3 grown children at various ages, his grandson Tyler as a baby and toddler and now gap-toothed 7-year-old. Sarah got Emma settled in the guest room, a space that normally served as Jake's home office, but had a daybed and dresser and enough room to be comfortable. She helped Emma change into an oversized t-shirt that would work as pajamas and showed her where the bathroom was, treating the situation with the calm professionalism of someone who knew how to make frightened children feel safe without overwhelming them with false cheerfulness. Tyler brought some of his stuffed animals to keep Emma's reindeer company, explaining very seriously that the animals were friendly and would help her not feel lonely during the night. In the kitchen, Jake heated up leftover chili and made grilled cheese sandwiches, comfort food that filled the house with warm smells that felt like home. They ate together at the kitchen table, Tyler chattering about Christmas and what Santa might bring, Sarah gently steering conversation toward normal topics that didn't require Emma to talk about what had happened. Emma ate slowly but steadily, the kind of eating that suggested she'd been hungry for a while. and Jake made sure she had seconds without making a big deal about it. After dinner, they moved to the living room where a modest Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments that told decades of family history. Tyler insisted on showing Emma his favorite ornaments, the handmade ones he'd created in preschool and kindergarten, the special glass ball with his name painted on it, the small motorcycle ornament that matched his grandpa's bike. Sarah made hot chocolate as promised, and they sat together watching a Christmas movie, with the tree lights glowing and the house feeling warm and safe in contrast to the cold December night outside. Emma started falling asleep halfway through the movie, her head drooping against the couch cushions, the stuffed reindeer tucked under her arm. Sarah carried her to the guest room and tucked her in, leaving the hallway light on and the door cracked open so Emma wouldn't wake in complete darkness and panic. When Sarah returned to the living room, she sat beside her father on the couch and let out a long breath that carried the emotional weight of the entire evening. "That poor baby," Sarah said quietly, her voice thick with suppressed tears. "How does a mother just walk away from her child on Christmas Eve? How does someone do that?" Jake shook his head, his own anger and sorrow mixing with the familiar helplessness that came from knowing evil existed and you couldn't always prevent it. "I don't know, honey. I've seen a lot of bad things in my life, a lot of people doing terrible things to kids who deserved better, but I'll never understand it. Never." He paused, looking toward the hallway where Emma slept. "What happens tomorrow? What's the realistic outcome here?" Sarah's expression showed the hard truth she'd learned from years working with the foster system. "Child Services will do an investigation, try to locate the mother, assess whether there's any family who can take Emma. If they can't find suitable placement with relatives, she'll go into emergency foster care while they sort out permanent arrangements. Given it's the holidays, everything will be slower than usual. She could be in limbo for weeks." Her voice dropped lower. "And honestly, Dad, even if they find the mother, even if she comes back with some story about an emergency or confusion, they might not return Emma to her care. This was intentional abandonment. That's criminal. Rebecca Chen might be facing charges. What about Emma's father? Do we know anything about him?" "Nothing concrete. Emma said he wasn't in their lives, which could mean anything from incarcerated to simply absent. Child Services will investigate, but I'm not optimistic." Sarah wiped at her eyes. "Oh, that little girl has been through so much already, and she's about to go through more. New placements, new schools, new everything while the system tries to figure out where she belongs. It's going to be hard on her." Jake thought about Emma's face when she'd asked if he was going to leave her too, that desperate need for someone to stay when everyone else had abandoned her. What if we offered to foster her, temporarily, until they find permanent placement? At least then she'd have stability with people she's already met instead of getting bounced around to strangers. Sarah looked at her father with surprise, and something that might have been pride. "Dad, that's a huge commitment. Foster care isn't just a few days. It could be months. It could be complicated with legal proceedings and family court and all kinds of challenges." "I know it's complicated," Jake said quietly, "but I've got the space. I've got the time since I'm retired, and I've got you nearby to help when needed." Tyler clearly took to her, which means visits here wouldn't be disruptive to your family. "And I can't shake the feeling that this kid needs someone to choose her, someone to show up and stay instead of leaving like everyone else in her life has done." His voice roughened with emotion. "I couldn't save Margaret when she was sick. I couldn't fix that or stop it from happening. But maybe I can help this one kid who needs someone to give a damn about her. Maybe that means something." Sarah reached over and squeezed her father's hand, her eyes wet with tears. "Mom would have loved this. You know that, right? She'd have brought Emma home without a second thought, and she'd have already been planning how to make Christmas morning special for a little girl who deserved better than she got. You're doing exactly what she would have done." They sat together in the quiet house, the Christmas tree lights casting gentle colors across the room, and made plans for how to approach Child Services the next day with a formal offer to provide foster care while Emma's case was sorted out. Christmas morning arrived bright and cold, the winter sun streaming through the windows of Jake's house and illuminating a scene that would have seemed impossible 12 hours earlier. Emma woke slowly, confused at first about where she was, but then she remembered the kind biker and his daughter and grandson, remembered being given hot chocolate and a safe place to sleep, remembered not being alone anymore. She got up and ventured into the hallway, following the sound of voices and the smell of bacon cooking. In the kitchen, Jake was making breakfast while Tyler sat at the table drawing pictures, and Sarah organized presents under the Christmas tree. When they saw Emma standing uncertainly in the doorway, they all smiled with genuine warmth that had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with welcome. "Merry Christmas, Emma," Sarah said gently. "Did you sleep okay?" Emma nodded, clutching her stuffed reindeer. "I had bad dreams, but then I remembered I was safe here, and I went back to sleep." "That's exactly what you should do," Jake said, plating bacon and eggs. "Come have some breakfast. We've got a few things to take care of today, but we're not in a rush." After breakfast, Sarah sat down with Emma and explained what would happen next in terms the 9-year-old could understand. People from Child Services would come to talk to Emma, ask her questions about her mom and her life, try to figure out the best place for her to stay while they sorted everything out. The police were looking for Emma's mother to find out why she'd left and whether Emma had any other family who could take care of her. And through all of this, Jake and Sarah wanted Emma to know she could stay with them for as long as needed, that they were willing to be her foster family if that's what Child Services approved. Emma listened with the careful attention of a child who'd learned young to pay attention to what adults said, because it directly affected her survival. "So I'm not going to some strange place with people I don't know?" "Not if we can help it," Sarah assured her. "We can't make absolute promises because there are rules and systems and people who make decisions. But we're going to try very hard to make sure you stay somewhere safe with people who care about you." Before the Child Services worker arrived, Tyler approached Emma with serious intent and handed her a wrapped present. "This was supposed to be for my friend Marcus, but I want you to have it instead because you need it more, and Marcus has lots of toys already." Emma looked at the gift with wide eyes, her hands trembling slightly as she took it. "I can open it?" Tyler nodded enthusiastically. "It's Christmas. You have to open presents on Christmas. That's the rule." Emma unwrapped the gift carefully, preserving the paper like it was precious, and found a children's book about a lost reindeer who found a new family. Tyler had picked it himself weeks ago, drawn to the story without knowing he'd end up giving it to a little girl who desperately needed its message. Emma hugged the book to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "This is the best present I've ever gotten." Tyler, with the emotional wisdom that sometimes emerged from children at unexpected moments, reached over and patted her hand. "You're welcome. And you're not lost anymore because you found us. We're your family now until you find your forever family." The Child Services worker who arrived later that morning was a woman named Linda Morrison, who'd been doing this work for 20 years and had seen every variation of family crisis imaginable. She interviewed Emma privately, spoke with Jake and Sarah at length, reviewed the police reports and Jake's background clearances, and ultimately made the decision that temporary foster placement with the Sullivan family was in Emma's best interest given the circumstances and the holiday timing. The paperwork was extensive, the requirements were strict, and the arrangement was clearly defined as temporary pending full investigation and assessment. But it meant Emma didn't have to leave the one place that had felt safe since her mother abandoned her. Over the following days, the full picture of Emma's situation emerged through police investigation and Child Services interviews. Rebecca Chen had been struggling financially and emotionally since moving to Missouri, had lost 2 jobs in 2 months, was facing eviction from her apartment, and had apparently reached a breaking point where she decided she couldn't handle being a parent anymore. She'd driven to Arkansas on Christmas Eve, checked into a motel using cash, and stayed there for 3 days before guilt or fear drove her to call the Springfield police and confess what she'd done. She was arrested and charged with child abandonment and endangerment, held pending trial, and Emma was officially placed in state custody. The search for Emma's father proved fruitless. He'd never been part of her life, was believed to be somewhere on the West Coast, and showed no interest in stepping forward when contacted through various databases and public record searches. Emma had no other family that could be located, no grandparents or aunts or uncles willing or able to take responsibility for a 9-year-old girl whose mother had committed a felony and whose father had never wanted to be involved. That left Emma in the system, another child among thousands waiting for permanent placement while living in temporary foster care. Jake and Sarah worked through the official process to become licensed foster parents specifically so they could continue caring for Emma while the state sorted out long-term plans. The process took 6 weeks of training classes, home inspections, background checks, and endless paperwork. But they completed every requirement because Emma had already become part of their family in the ways that mattered, and the thought of her being moved to strangers felt wrong to everyone involved. Tyler treated Emma like the sister he'd never had, sharing his toys and his room and his boundless 7-year-old enthusiasm for life. Sarah provided the maternal presence Emma desperately needed, helping her navigate school enrollment and therapy appointments and the complicated feelings that came from being abandoned by the one person who should have been her constant. And Jake became the steady, protective force that Emma had never had in her life. He taught her to ride a bike in his driveway, took her to motorcycle club events where dozens of other bikers treated her with gentle respect, helped her with homework at the kitchen table, and was there every single day proving through actions that he wasn't going anywhere, that his promise to stay wasn't conditional or temporary, but real and lasting. 6 months after that Christmas Eve night at Walmart, Emma's case reached a critical decision point. Rebecca Chen pled guilty to child abandonment charges and relinquished her parental rights as part of a plea agreement. Emma's father, when finally located and served with legal papers, signed away his rights without contest, admitting he'd never wanted to be a parent and had no intention of starting now. That left Emma legally free for adoption, with no biological family claiming her or fighting for custody. Linda Morrison, the child services worker who'd been managing Emma's case since that first Christmas morning, sat in Jake's living room and laid out the reality with compassionate honesty. Emma is an adoptable child now. We'll place her profile with adoption agencies, try to find a permanent family who wants to adopt a 9-year-old girl with some trauma history. It's not the easiest placement. Older children are harder to match than babies, but we'll do our best to find her the right fit. She paused, looking between Jake and Sarah. Unless you've considered adoption yourselves, the paperwork could be simplified significantly since you're already licensed foster parents and Emma has been thriving in your care. Jake looked at Emma, who was sitting on the floor playing a board game with Tyler, the two children laughing over some joke that only made sense to them. He thought about the past 6 months, about how this scared little girl clutching a stuffed reindeer in a Walmart aisle had become part of the fabric of his daily life, about how his house felt full again in ways it hadn't since Margaret died, about how being Emma's foster father had given him purpose and joy and a reason to be his best self every single day. He thought about all the kids he'd helped through Ozark Thunder's charity work over the years, the toy runs and fundraisers and community events designed to support children who had nothing. And he realized that this one child who'd needed someone to see her and stay had become the most important thing in his world. Sarah was watching him with knowing eyes, a small smile on her face that said she already knew what his answer would be. "What do you think, Dad? You ready to make it permanent?" Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I think I'd be honored to be Emma's father. If she wants me, if that's something she'd be okay with." Linda smiled. "Why don't we ask her?" They called Emma over and explained in terms she could understand that Jake had the option to adopt her, to become her legal father permanently, to make her part of his family not just temporarily, but forever. They made it clear this was her choice, that she could say no if she wanted something different, that they'd support whatever decision felt right to her. Emma looked at Jake with those dark eyes that had seen too much loss, but were learning to trust again. "If you adopt me, does that mean you'll be my dad forever? Like Tyler is your grandson forever?" "That's exactly what it means," Jake said quietly. "It means you're my daughter and nobody can change that or take it away. It means this is your home and your family for as long as you want it." Emma's face crumpled and she launched herself at Jake, wrapping her small arms around his neck and crying into his shoulder. "I want that," she sobbed. "I want you to be my dad forever. I want to stay here with you and Sarah and Tyler. I don't want to go anywhere else ever." Jake held her tight, this child he'd found abandoned in a store 6 months ago, who'd become the daughter he'd never known he needed. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The adoption was finalized 4 months later in a Missouri courtroom on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Emma Chen became Emma Sullivan with the stroke of a judge's pen, legally and permanently Jake's daughter with all the rights and protections that entailed. The courtroom was filled with Jake's family, Sarah and Tyler in the front row, Jake's 2 other adult children who'd driven in from out of state, and 24 members of Ozark Thunder MC who'd shown up in full leather to witness one of their brothers become a father again at age 47. Emma wore a new dress that Sarah had helped her pick out, blue with white flowers, and she held Jake's hand throughout the entire proceeding with fierce determination. When the judge asked if she understood what adoption meant, Emma stood up straight and spoke in a clear voice that showed how much she'd grown in the 10 months since Christmas Eve. "It means Jake is my dad forever, and I'm his daughter forever, and nobody can change that because we chose each other, and that's what makes a real family." The judge, a woman who'd presided over hundreds of adoption cases in her career, smiled with genuine warmth. "That's exactly right, Emma, and it's my honor to make it official." She signed the final papers and brought down her gavel. "Adoption granted. Emma Sullivan, welcome to your forever family." The Ozark Thunder members erupted in applause and whistles, their leather and chains and intimidating appearances contrasting sharply with the tears streaming down many of their faces. These men who'd spent years protecting vulnerable people through their charity work were witnessing one of their own do the most profound act of protection possible, choosing to be a father to a child who'd been thrown away. After the ceremony, they formed a motorcycle escort for Jake's truck as he drove Emma home, 18 bikes riding in formation through Springfield with their engines roaring in celebration. That night, Jake tucked Emma into bed in the room that was now permanently hers, no longer a guest space but a daughter's bedroom filled with her books and toys and the stuffed reindeer that still held pride of place on her pillow. He sat on the edge of her bed, and Emma looked up at him with contentment that 9 months ago would have seemed impossible. "Dad?" she said, testing out the word that was now officially correct. "I want to tell you something." Jake smiled. "What's that, sweetheart?" "Thank you for not walking away. That night at Walmart when I was sitting there and everyone kept walking past me like I didn't exist, I thought nobody was ever going to help me. I thought I was going to sit there forever until somebody made me leave, and I didn't know what would happen to me. But then you stopped. You saw me when nobody else did. And you didn't leave even though you could have. You stayed and you kept staying, and now you're my dad forever." Emma's voice was thick with emotion but steady with certainty. "My real mom left me and my real dad never wanted me. But you chose me even though you didn't have to. That means more than anything. That means I matter to somebody." Jake felt tears burning in his eyes as he leaned down to kiss her forehead. "You matter to a lot of somebodies, Emma. You matter to me and Sarah and Tyler and everyone in our family. And I need you to understand something important. Finding you that night, bringing you home, becoming your dad, that's the best thing that's happened to me in years. You didn't just get rescued that night. I did too. Because being your father has given me purpose and joy and love I didn't know I was missing. So thank you for letting me be your dad. Thank you for giving me the honor of being the person who gets to watch you grow up." Years later, when Emma was 16 and applying to colleges with dreams of becoming a social worker who helped kids in the foster system, she would write her application essay about that Christmas Eve night in a Walmart when a biker stopped to ask if she was okay. She wrote about the terror of being abandoned, the despair of watching hundreds of people walk past without seeing her, and the transformative moment when one man decided to pay attention and act. She wrote about how that single decision to not walk away had changed the trajectory of her entire life, had given her a family and a home, and the understanding that her worth wasn't determined by the parents who'd failed her, but by the people who'd chosen to show up and stay. Her essay ended with words that captured everything she'd learned about rescue and family and the power of one person caring enough to intervene. Sometimes the people who save us don't look like heroes from movies or stories. Sometimes they look like a big biker in a leather vest shopping for batteries on Christmas Eve. Sometimes rescue happens not through grand gestures, but through simple acts of noticing and caring and refusing to walk away when someone needs help. My father didn't know he was going to become my father that night. He just knew a child was scared and alone and needed someone to see her. But by choosing to see me, by choosing to stay, he gave me everything. He gave me safety and stability and love. He gave me a family. He gave me a future. And he taught me that the measure of a person isn't how they look or where they come from, but whether they're willing to show up for someone who needs them. That's the kind of person I want to be. That's the legacy of being my father's daughter. The essay won her a full scholarship to her first-choice university, but more importantly, it captured a truth that Jake had lived every day since finding Emma in that toy aisle, that sometimes the greatest gifts we give aren't planned or expected, but happen in moments when we choose connection over convenience, when we choose to see people who've been rendered invisible, when we choose to stay instead of walking away. One abandoned child, one observant biker, one promise to not leave. Sometimes that's all it takes to transform two lives and prove that family isn't always about biology, but about who shows up when it matters most and refuses to leave even when things get hard. Jake Sullivan had gone to Walmart for batteries and come home with a daughter. And both of them had found something more valuable than anything that could be wrapped in Christmas paper, the gift of being chosen, of being seen, of being loved, not because you had to be, but because someone decided you were worth staying for.